Katy didn't fit the profile of somebody that was going to take her own life.
It's all wrong.
I was being intimidated not to investigate this.
This mightn't go down too well with certain people.
I needed somebody to come forward that was close to Katy, close to what happened.
I am joined by a very special new guest, James Brannigan. And this is the first video in what will become a very exciting series, which I'm looking forward to begin. So we'll kick it straight off. Welcome, James, to the channel.
Thank you, Luke.
Can you tell the Break the Ice audience a bit about yourself and the background that you come from?
Yeah, I joined the Police Service of Northern Ireland in 2025 and spent 18 years investigating homicides, doing some counter-terrorist work. So my background is mostly in homicide work. It's something which I was lucky enough to get into early on in my career in the police and pretty much stayed with it for the rest of my time. And what I've focused on within the police is this notion of hidden homicides, where you could see more and more where homicides are so hard to get away with the advances in technology, that a lot of these domestic murders were what I term hidden homicides, where the perpetrator was trying to hide the fact that he had killed a woman. And let's be honest, it's mostly men killing women. There is a couple of cases we are helping with where a man has been the victim, but in general, it is men killing women in a domestic setting. And one of the biggest or most challenging cases ever dealt with was the case of Katy Simpson. There's a Sky documentary on it called The Death of a Showjumper. Some of your viewers may have seen it.
Katy didn't fit the profile of somebody that was going to take her own life.
It's all wrong.
I was being intimidated not to investigate this.
This mightn't go down too well with certain people.
It's where a young jockey was alleged to have in Derry. I was approached by members of the public because they knew the work I had done within the police when uncovering the first nobody murder in Ireland, and they were asking for help in relation to Katy, and they felt there was something wrong with this case. And with this case, I looked at it and I could see that the police in Derry, which were 70 miles away from where my base was in Armagh, that they did not want to look at it, and they were writing it off as the member of the public that contacted me. I was a police officer. I'm duty bound to answer their queries. They had queries or questions about the death of Katy. So I started to look into it. I knew, though, that the senior officers from Derry were a bit aghast at why I was looking at it, why I was troubling myself with this incident. For the next number of days, I gathered evidence myself, working my own time, looking at the scene photographs, the autopsy photographs, talking to friends, talking to family, and talking to people in the horsey fraternity, because when they looked at her post-mortem photographs, she was heavily bruised. When you asked the pathologist, when you looked at the post-mortem photographs, there was no ligature mark, yet this girl was meant to have hung herself. So I spoke to the pathologist. He said because she had survived for a week in hospital, well kept alive, that the bruises may have dissipated. But then I want to know the rest of the bruises on her body. And he said he had received information that she'd fallen from a horse before she went into hospital. So I asked people who I knew in the horse riding industry and our sector, had she fallen from a horse the day before she went into hospital? And no, she was at an event, but had not fallen from a horse. Her body raised more questions. And it wasn't me saying this is a murder, this is a murder. It's about answering the questions. And this is what I'm going on to talk about, is getting the questions answered for families. On her legs, all the way up, her right leg was linear bruising all the way up. Bruising on the inner thigh, linear bruising on her arm, a small mark on her neck, tiny mark, a cut on her lip, but both her hands were like boxing gloves, black, blue, swollen. And I was asking the pathologist what caused these injuries. He said, I was told she fell from a horse. I said, they don't look like injuries a horse would give you. but I'm not an expert on that. The bruises on the leg are what were termed tramline bruising, where you'd be beaten with a rod type implement. So where the implement hits you, there'll be no bruise, but there'll be a bruise on either side. So it just looks like tramlines.
Yeah.
Then it's like, right, she has been attacked, but he didn't establish, the pathologist didn't give us that information until weeks after. So you had the post-mortem results, or the post-mortem photographs. The pathologist said it was possible hanging, but not, or possible hanging. And that's as far as the pathologist went. I spoke to previous victims. He had serious offence or serious attack on a woman a number of years back where he was in prison for it. And there was just all these questions. How did he get her down? Why did he get her down? Why did he put her in the car? Why did he take her in the car to the hospital instead of waiting for an ambulance? There's just all these questions. Could she have hung herself from those seen photographs when there was clothes on the first, say, 2/4 of the banister? And it's just these questions that we had. So on the 14th of, I got that call on the 11th, about 1:30 on the 11th of August 2020. And then on the 14th of August at 2 p.m., I knew we were on call for the whole country. So I took this case to my bosses and said, we need to look at this. And they said, yeah, we do. To cut a long story short, what transpired was the more I pushed it, the more intimidation I got from senior officers. And you senior officers openly attacking me, trying to intimidate me away from investigating it. And it has come out in a BBC podcast that a journalist, I'm aware of the details of this myself, but all I'm willing to say at the moment is that senior political figures were trying to intimidate the journalists from asking questions into the murder also. And I know the connection between those political figures and the senior officers. So it was a very disturbing incident. And then I got a chance to run the investigation. The senior officers in the police said, yeah, you guys in Armagh, you're to investigate this murder, even though it happened 70 miles away. And the murder investigation team at that location were not to investigate it. There is an ongoing criminal investigation into the police action, and we'll leave it there. I'll not try to speculate on it too much because there is an ongoing investigation into why I was being intimidated and why people didn't want this investigated. A lot of it doesn't come out in the Sky documentary for obvious reasons, because there is an ongoing investigation and there will be more information to come out on this. Got the suspect arrested, charged, but what we established then that he was controlling a number of women, and that these women helped the suspect Jonathan Creswell cover up Katy's murder. One of the women, on the day she was taken to hospital, went back to the house with Johnny, took his clothes, cleaned up blood. Another woman travelled about 40 miles to meet this woman to take his clothes to a laundrette 40 miles away, in a garage forecourt, and then bring them back to Derry. The cover up that went into it from the women, and these women were meant to be friends of Katy. It's a shocking case. And after that, and other things going on in the police in Northern Ireland, and the impact it was having on me, I left on ill health grounds. It's I'm from the Republic of Ireland. I was policing in the north of Ireland, and there was still a lot of some terrorist activity and heavy targeting of police and police officers being killed and attacked. So you have that threat hanging over you the whole time. And I knew after Katie's case that because I'd ruffled so many feathers, my cards were marked from then on. And this was proven to me by certain actions being taken from certain quarters against me, which is the subject of legal action that I'm currently taking against the police. Again, I'll talk about it in more detail when that is established, how they were trying to, in essence, blacken my name, to discredit me, and to get me removed from the case or anything got to do with the case. It was so that's why in the end I left the police. But before getting to that case, and why that case came to me, was because of the work I was doing with hidden homicides. As I said, I led the investigation into the first no-body murder in the island of Ireland. We still haven't not recovered Charlotte's body, but we were able to get her partner convicted with her murder. And it's a circumstantial case, but it was the strength of that case that the jury only took 2.5 hours to deliberate in relation to the verdict. And this is where the CPS, the PPS, all need to get out of their zones that they're in within their office and within legal text. You get any evidence, whether it be a circumstantial case or a strong case, and just think about putting that case in front of a jury and putting that story in front of a jury. And in the Katy Simpson case, what the barrister did on the first day of the court case was very smart. He just detailed the story. This is the evidence we'll produce. This is what we're going to tell you throughout this trial, what he did to Katy and the evidence we have. This is our story.
Why do you feel like there's been some kind of corruption within that case? Because that's what it sounds like.
Well, I know there was, and I can't comment on it here now because of the ongoing investigation. But
Investigation.
I will tell all when the investigation is over, all the nuances of it that I know. It's shocking. I always told my colleagues, you watch the documentary, the White House farm murders in Essex in 1980, 81 or 82, where you have a detective sergeant saying, this is not this is a homicide by somebody else. And he was ridiculed, and the intimidation he got. That was 1980 in Essex. This was 2020 in the PSNI, one of the allegedly most professional, scrutinized police services in the world. And they hold that mantle up that they are one of the best, but still went on within that police service. And where you have, and this is all police services are the same, where you have a rank structured, disciplined organization such as a police service, this can always happen. And you would latch onto that, the silo working that takes place within police services. And it's about, even with the Charlotte Murray case, the first no-body murder, trying to get the public prosecution service to take that case was a challenge. I had to go to a KC or QC at the time that I knew. He was one of the most well-respected KCs in the country, in our QCs in the country. And I said,
Is that King's Counsel?
Yeah. Well, at the time it was Queen's Counsel.
Queen's, yeah.
So I took this case of the Charlotte Murray who disappeared, and he goes, that's a good case to run with. And then when I went back to the public prosecution service and said, we want to run this case, they said, no, there's no body. There's not enough evidence. I said, your best QC says it will run. And so I kind of cornered them into running it at that point. But you had to work so hard for the PPS to actually run that investigation. Yet it only took a jury 2.5 hours to convict. All the evidence was there. And it was a challenging case, but because of that case, then people knew what I was doing and how tenacious I was about investigations. That it was a journalist who watched that covered that trial, came to me and said, "Listen, will you look at this death of Katy Simpson?"
This is where it started. Then
that's where it started, but it's hard to get across the impact it has on you when the intimidation you're getting. You're there to do the right, not be right, to do the right thing. This person had come with information, and I did a report on the I think it was the 20th of August that 2020. Sent it to 2 chief inspectors. It was just questions, photographs, scene photographs, autopsy photographs, and just questions about everything that happened. And my last paragraph was, if these questions are to be answered correctly, they have to be done within a major investigation team. And that's all it needed, is the questions answered. But the intimidation I faced was shocking. And I'll give you one example of what happened. I knew from talking to witnesses, previous victims, and this guy, Jonathan Creswell, I knew he was a dangerous sociopath. He was a danger to women. That was fact. So I put on the investigation log for all to see that this individual is a dangerous sociopath. He's a danger to women. Everything must be done to find out what happened to Katy Simpson. It's not saying he's murdered, just let's find out what happened. And a short time later, this is now, it's still a sudden death, sitting with uniformed officers in Derry. A couple of hours later, I receive a call from a chief inspector. He says, "Do you see what you've wrote in that log? See how stupid you are?" He says, "That shows you have a bias already. If this was get to court, this is disclosable. Stop what you're doing. Stop making a fucking fool of yourself." Now that really spoke volumes to me. Here you had a chief inspector from a major investigation team looking at the log of a sudden death that's sitting with uniformed officers, which he's nothing to do with. How did he know what I wrote on the log? Why was he monitoring the log? Or who was informing him what I wrote on the log?
Am I right to presume that you left the police because you didn't like what you were seeing with their practices?
There was a couple of reasons I left the police. Well, I was under a lot of threats myself, and there was other
What for? Why were you getting? Why were you getting threats?
distant Republicans who were trying to kill me because you were a police officer.
All right,
and I was so active and tenacious in my investigations. People didn't like you. But then when I was leaving the police, and I just left. Before I left the police officers and major investigation teams were coming to me, asking me to help in relation to deaths that had occurred. They knew they couldn't take it to their superiors. They knew that I would do something about it. So one of these cases, I started looking into, and there were just serious questions about this case. I can't discuss it, and I'll tell you why. But I can't discuss the name of the person. But when I looked at it, there were serious issues I had around this woman allegedly and the individual who was alleged to have found her. How he acted beforehand, what he was doing to her, how he acted after. But it was sitting with uniform. No, that's where it's staying. So I sat with the family and drew up a list of questions. These are just questions that you need to have answered. You are not going to the meeting with the chief constable saying it's a murder, we want a murder investigation. Just go with the questions. And when they went to meet the chief constable with those questions, they left the meeting with a murder investigation. And that's the power of when you put the questions that are still standing to the police. So I found doing that was challenging enough, where you're trying to help a family like that on your own. So what I decided to do on the 18th of July was set up a charity called the Katy Trust. My aim was to help families going forward like that, like I'd helped that other family that now had a murder investigation. So help families going forward. But what I've discovered has shocked me. I never thought it would be like this, but we now have 50 families we're trying to help. People have outstanding questions in relation to how their loved one died. I started in Northern Ireland, got about 18 from there quite quickly, developed into the south of Ireland, and now we're in England, and we've 50 plus already investigations where it's mostly women having died at the hands of a partner, and it's a mountain of work we have to do, and we're working around the clock. We've got a lot of people working with us. We
I
have.
was going to say, do you work in a team then, and who does that team consist of? Is it ex-professionals like yourself?
It's it's about 20 in total, ex-police officers, homicide detectives, some with years of experience, ex-superintendents, have managed significant cases, other homicide detectives, sergeants, both from An Garda Síochána in the Republic of Ireland, the Police Service Northern Ireland, and various police services from England. Sometimes it's hard to keep these officers because we're doing everything pro bono. Everything is free. Yeah, we're not paying anybody. We have 3 pathologists working pro bono. We have 3 solicitors working pro bono, a physician. We have now excellent, it's brilliant. We have 2 analysts, which are worth their weight in gold, working with us. And we've 1 OSINT expert, open source intelligence expert, all working together because they see the need out there and the help we're giving these families. We have to be brutally honest with the families, because we can't tell them we're going to do something for them. That'll just re-traumatize them. What we do is we act independent and impartial. If we see information there that will satisfy us evidentially that there's no third party involvement in their loved one's death, we will show them that independent, impartial information. And they are more inclined to believe us because we are independent and impartial, and we have over 100 years of experience dealing with homicides and investigation, that we can show, and we have shown some families that, listen, there's no third party involvement in this, and we've exhausted all avenues and we've given them all the answers they need. The other side is where there's questions still remaining outstanding, we do reports for police services, or we get experts in to report on evidence we have uncovered. And at that point, if there's questions remaining, we then go to the police service. Now, the attitude we're getting from police service to police service varies wildly. We've have 4 investigations now which have been turned into homicides since our intervention, and the police services are actively pursuing now homicide inquiries. And at that point, we stop. We're not there to lock horns with the police or investigate in some space around the police. If there's an investigation taking place, we stop. We then advocate for the family and support the family, because if there's a murder investigation taking place, it's a very traumatic time for a family. Somebody has been murdered within that family. It's like a bomb going off in the family unit, and we'll stand there and support them. We also have a whole therapeutic side. So 24, 48 hours after they have their first meeting with the trust, from an investigative point of view, a trauma specialist will meet with them, and then they will set out a course of action going forward, whether they need counselling or what other type of support they need, and depending on different people within the family. And I'm proud to say the Katy Trust can now give counselling support to individuals quicker than the NHS or any other state provider. And all these families have been totally let down by the state, because all the agencies of the state have always just told them, patted them on the head, we're the police, we know best. And the way some of the families have been treated is shocking. And we are, in a lot of cases, the first people even just to listen to them. And even that in itself is extremely helpful for the families. It is heartbreaking, some of the stories. And the common thread you see, and this is something we're trying to build awareness and training also. All the cases, especially the domestic homicides that you're dealing with, all have the same points, where you're talking to the family and they'll talk about the loved one getting into a relationship, all moved on really quickly, moved in quickly, then isolation set in. And then if they mentioned the person was looking to leave or had found somebody else, then this is most likely a homicide. If you're in a controlling relationship, a coercively controlling relationship, you're 70% more likely to die when you want to leave that relationship than any other. If you're leaving for somebody else, that's even higher. And a lot of these cases stem around somebody leaving at that point in the relationship. The other thing the public need to be aware of, these domestic murders are not generally crimes of passion or just this rage. They are usually well-planned events by a sociopath, by a manipulator who's able to control the narrative, especially when law enforcement turn up at the scene. I'll give you an example. One of the cases I dealt with in the PSNI was a woman who drowned off a boat in Fermanagh, and he rang the police. My wife has fallen in. We got him convicted of that murder because we had to prove that he had drugged her and put her in. But he had come out the previous weekend to do a practice run on the boat. That's the amount of prepping that individual went into.
Right.
And this is probably more and more, so it's where you try hide the body to as well hide the homicide. So we also include disappearance in what we'll investigate or assist family with, where the loved ones has apparently just disappeared. And people don't disappear. Something has happened to them. And it's about trying to get all the questions answered about that individual. And today's world of technology, it's easier to find out what happened to people, especially at that time they went missing.